Eleanor needs a reset. You have a career, Kelsey. Your sister has trauma. Don't be selfish with assets you don't even use daily. My mother didn't even look up from her clipboard as she said it. She was standing in the middle of my living room, directing movers to carry out my grandfather's antique clock. The locks were already changed. My furniture was already on the truck. She wasn't asking to borrow my cabin. She was stealing it right in front of my face because she decided I didn't need it. Before I tell you what I found in the trash can outside something that made me call the FBI instead of the police, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a fit. I turned around, walked out the door, and got back into my car. My mother probably thought I was running away to cry. She thought she was gaslighting a sensitive daughter who would eventually roll over and take it. She forgot who she was talking to. She forgot that I am a senior forensic auditor who hunts cartel assets for a living. I don't get mad. I get evidence. I locked my car doors and opened my laptop. My hands were steady as I accessed the county clerk's portal. One search. That was all it took. A quitclaim deed had been filed 48 hours ago, transferring my property, my sanctuary, into a trust controlled by my mother. I stared at the signature at the bottom. It was my name, in my handwriting, but the digital notary stamp was time-stamped for Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Tuesday at 2 o'clock, I was hosting a global Zoom call with 50 stakeholders. I wasn't signing deeds. It was a sloppy, arrogant forgery. I remembered how Emma used to tell us she loved us equally, how she would cut our sandwiches into the exact same shapes so we wouldn't fight. I looked at that forged signature and realized the knife had always been in her hand. She was just waiting for the right time to cut me out. My cursor hovered over the report fraud button. My finger twitched. I could end this right now. I could call the sheriff, show the timestamp, and have the deed voided. But then I stopped. If I reported it now, it would just be a civil dispute. They would cry. They would say it was a misunderstanding. And they would guilt me into silence. To escape them, I didn't need a family argument. I needed a federal crime. I needed them to cross a line that no amount of tears could wash away. I didn't push the button. I closed the laptop, put the car in gear, and drove away. I wasn't leaving. I was waiting. I picked up my phone and typed the text that would seal their fate. Fine. If Eleanor needs it, I won't fight. I just want peace. I'll stay away. I stared at the screen for a second, then hit send. It was the lie they wanted to hear. It was the surrender they expected from the daughter who always folded, the one who always apologized for taking up space. The response from my mother came back in less than 30 seconds. Thank you for finally being mature, Kelsey. We knew you'd understand. We're doing this for the family. I didn't reply. I didn't block them. Instead, I turned my phone into a surveillance tool. I knew my parents. I knew that stealing the cabin wasn't the endgame. It was just the first move. They didn't need a view of the lake. They needed liquidity. My sister, Eleanor, didn't have a trauma problem. She had a gambling problem. She had debts that couldn't be paid with tears and apologies, and my parents were desperate to cover her tracks before her creditors stopped being polite. I just had to wait for them to make the move I knew was coming. It took exactly 3 days. I was sitting in my office, staring at a spreadsheet, when my phone pinged with a priority alert from my credit monitoring service. A hard inquiry. A lender called Lakeside Equity had pulled the file on the cabin property. I clicked through the details. And there it was. A loan application for a home equity line of credit. The amount was $200,000. They weren't just stealing the house to live in it. They were leveraging it. They were using the equity I had built over 10 years of mortgage payments to bail Eleanor out of her latest mess. They were going to drain the property dry and leave me with the husk. I leaned back in my chair and felt a cold, sharp satisfaction. This was it. This was the escalation I needed. If they just lived in the house, it was trespassing. But borrowing against it with a forged deed? That was bank fraud. That was wire fraud. That was a federal prison sentence wrapped in a loan agreement. I opened a file on my computer and started drafting a document called a lis pendens. In the legal world, it's a notice of pending action. It's basically a giant red flag planted on a property title that tells any bank or buyer, stop. This property is in dispute. If you touch this, you will lose your money. While I typed, my phone buzzed again. It was a notification from Facebook. My mother had just posted a photo. It was her and Lucas, my father, sitting on my deck, clinking glasses of champagne with the lake sparkling behind them. The caption read, "New beginnings at the lake house. So blessed to have this sanctuary for our family." The comments were full of friends congratulating them on their purchase. I looked at their smiling faces. So arrogant. So sure they had won. Then I looked at the printer as it spit out the lis pendens. They were celebrating a theft. I was printing their eviction notice. I took the paper, folded it neatly, and placed it in a manila envelope. I wasn't going to warn them. I was going to let them walk right into the bank and sign their names on the line. Tuesday morning arrived with the precision of a guillotine blade. It was closing day. While my parents were putting on their best church clothes to go defraud a bank, I was sitting in my car outside the county clerk's office, watching the doors unlock. I checked my watch. 8:59. In exactly 1 hour, my parents, Emma and Lucas, had an appointment at the downtown branch of the lender to sign the final paperwork for a $200,000 home equity line of credit. They thought they were securing a future for their golden child. They didn't know they were signing a confession. My phone buzzed in my lap. It was a text from Eleanor. I hadn't heard from her since the movers gutted my house, but now that the money was practically in her account, she felt generous. Thanks for understanding, sis. I know this is hard for you, but it's for the best. I'll let you visit on weekends if you call ahead. I stared at the message. Visit on weekends. As if I needed a guest pass to enter the home I had paid for with 10 years of 60-hour work weeks. She wasn't just taking the house. She was taking ownership of my dignity. I didn't reply. I didn't block her. I needed her to feel safe. I needed her to keep spending that money in her head, booking flights and paying off bookies, digging the hole so deep she'd never climb out. At 9 o'clock sharp, I walked up to the clerk's window. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I slid the manila envelope across the counter. Inside was the lease pendens. Once this document is stamped and recorded, the property is legally radioactive. No lender in their right mind would fund a loan against it because their collateral is essentially worthless until the court case is settled. The clerk didn't ask questions. He reviewed the parcel number, checked the filing fee, and picked up his stamp. Ka-chunk. That heavy, mechanical sound echoed through the quiet room. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. At 5 minutes past 9, the lis pendens was recorded. The trap was armed. But here is the crucial part. I didn't call the bank. I didn't fax a copy to the loan officer. Not yet. If I warned the bank now, they would simply cancel the closing. My parents would walk away angry but free. They would claim it was a misunderstanding, a paperwork error. They would survive to gaslight me another day. I needed them to commit. I needed them to sit in that leather chair, look the loan officer in the eye, and sign a federal document stating they owned that property free and clear. I needed them to cross the line from shitty parents to felons. I walked back to my car and waited. 10 o'clock. They were walking into the bank now. 10:15. They were reviewing the terms. 10:30. My father, Lucas, was probably making a joke about interest rates, while my mother smiled that practiced innocent smile. 10:45. Pen to paper. They were signing. They were promising to repay a debt secured by a house they didn't own, using a deed they had forged. I sat there, watching the minutes tick by on my dashboard, feeling a cold, heavy stone settle in my stomach. I remembered the time I broke my arm when I was 7, and my father told me to stop crying because insurance was expensive. I remembered the way Emma looked at me when I got my scholarship, like I was abandoning them. They had taught me that everything was transactional. They taught me that love was conditional on what I could provide. Today, I was finally speaking their language. 11 o'clock. It was done. The papers were signed. The intent to defraud was legally cemented in ink. Now, I just had to wait for the money to move. The waiting game is the hardest part of any audit. You know the numbers don't add up. You know the crash is coming. But you have to sit on your hands and let the disaster happen. I watched the bank doors for another 20 minutes. Finally, my mother walked out. She wasn't holding a wire transfer receipt. She was holding a thick white envelope. Smart. Wires leave digital footprints that are easy to trace. A cashier's check made out to a contractor some shell company Eleanor's bookie probably set up. Looks like a legitimate renovation expense. It's harder to claw back once it's cashed. A red convertible pulled into the lot, tires screeching slightly. Eleanor. She didn't look like someone in need of a mental health reset. She looked like someone who had just won the lottery. She jumped out, hugged Emma, and snatched the envelope. There was no hesitation, no guilt, just a quick transaction in the parking lot between a mother enabling a crime and a daughter profiting from it. Eleanor hopped back into her car and sped off toward the highway. The money was physically gone. That was the signal. I opened my car door. "It's time," I said into my phone. A black sedan parked 2 spots down opened up, and Mr. Vance, my real estate attorney, stepped out. He smoothed his tie, looking every bit the shark I was paying him to be. We walked into the bank together, bypassing the teller line and heading straight for the glass-walled office where my parents had just signed their lives away. The loan officer was still stacking the paperwork, a satisfied smile on his face. He probably thought he'd just closed an easy commission. When he saw us walk in, his smile faltered. Can I help you? I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding regarding the funding for the lakeside property, Mr. Vance said, his voice smooth as silk. He placed a certified copy of the lease pendants on the desk. My client, Miss Kelsey Grant, filed a notice of pending action on the title at 9:05 this morning. That was approximately 2 hours before you executed this loan. The loan officer picked up the document. I watched the color drain from his face. He looked at the timestamp. He looked at the parcel number. Then he looked at his computer screen, realizing he had just issued a secured loan against a property that was already legally radioactive. We did a title search yesterday, he stammered. And you closed today, I said, leaning forward. The title is contested. The deed they used to secure this loan is a forgery. I have the forensic report right here. I slid the second folder across the desk. You are currently holding a mortgage on a house your borrowers don't own. The officer grabbed the phone, dialing frantically, likely trying to stop the check. It's a cashier's check, I said coldly. And it just left the parking lot. It's cash. It's gone. The silence in the office was deafening. The officer slumped back in his chair. He knew exactly what this meant. If the collateral was void, the mortgage wasn't a mortgage anymore. It was an unsecured personal debt of $200,000. Obtained through fraud. The bank wouldn't wait 30 years for repayment. They would demand the full balance immediately. And since the money was already in the wind with Eleanor, they would go after the only assets left. My parents' primary residence and their retirement accounts. Mr. Vance snapped his briefcase shut. The sound was like a gavel coming down. He turned to me. His job officially done. You don't need a real estate lawyer anymore, Kelsey. You're a witness in a federal investigation now. Don't call me unless you want to sue for damages. I'm out. He walked out of the bank, leaving me alone with the man who was about to make the worst phone call of my parents' lives. The fallout was immediate. When a major financial institution realizes they've been defrauded of $200,000, they don't send polite letters. They drop the hammer. By the time I walked out of the bank, the hard freeze had already been initiated. Emma and Lucas weren't just losing the money they'd stolen from the house. Their personal checking accounts, their savings, and even their retirement funds were locked down pending a fraud investigation. They were stranded in the city with credit cards that wouldn't work, and a looming federal indictment. They couldn't come save their golden child. Eleanor was on her own. I drove to the cabin where a sheriff's deputy was already waiting. I had reported it not as a family dispute, but as an active property crime. I showed him the deed and the fraud report. She's inside, I said. She's damaged the property and refuses to leave. I unlocked the door with my key, bypassing the weak code the locksmith had set. Inside, Eleanor sat on a sofa she'd bought with my money, wine in hand. She wasn't scared, just irritated. I live here, she said. You don't, I replied. You're trespassing. She claimed squatters' rights and smirked at the deputy, calling it a civil matter. I interrupted and showed him my phone. An Airbnb and VRBO listing, posted the day before my home, marketed as a short-term rental, under her name. She doesn't have residency, I said calmly. She's committing fraud. The deputy's tone changed instantly. Eleanor was given 10 minutes to leave or be arrested. She panicked, screaming for her mother. But I told her the truth. The accounts were frozen, the forgery exposed. She was on her own. She packed in chaos, cursing and crying, and left dragging garbage bags down the driveway. I reset the locks and stood alone in the cabin, the silence heavy but controlled. I thought it was over. Then the power cut out clean and instant. Metal clanged outside near the utility box. I moved away from the windows and opened the security app. The cameras switched to night vision. It was my father, Lucas. Crowbar in one hand, gas can in the other. He broke a window and climbed inside, not looking for me, but for the laptop he thought held the evidence. He didn't understand the cloud. He began pouring gasoline across the kitchen. This was an extinction burst, the violent last surge when control is lost. I had cut off his money, pride, and power. For a narcissist, that feels like death. He struck a match. The system triggered automatically. Emergency services were already dispatched. I activated the speakers. "Smile, Dad," I said. "You're on camera." He froze. Sirens sounded at the gate. He dropped the crowbar. It was over. I watched from the porch as police led him away in handcuffs. No rage, just confusion. The evidence was undeniable. Attempted arson, breaking and entering. Combined with existing fraud charges, he wasn't going home. The fallout was swift. The bank seized funds and accelerated the mortgage. My mother lost her house. Eleanor's credit collapsed. I cut all contact. I sold the cabin and moved to Oregon, buying a new place under an LLC. My name is nowhere on the deed. I deleted the final spreadsheet labeled Family Audit. I didn't feel victorious. I felt light. I sold the cabin, but I kept the peace. If you've ever had to burn a bridge to save yourself from drowning, you're not alone.